Today, we're going to talk about how to launch a strategic and lead generating podcast. I'm so excited you're here. If we have not met yet, my name is Alicia Galati. I am the CEO and founder and podcast strategist of Galati Media. And our agency, we offer full service podcast management services. So helping business owners specifically, as well as some nonprofits, launch strategic podcasts that bring them leads, land them speaking gigs, and connect them on a deeper level with their audience. I live in sunny North Carolina with my husband, 2 boys, and a rescue pup. When I'm not working, you can find me either hiking, chasing my kids around, or watching the latest Star Wars with my husband. All right, let's get right in. So today we're going to talk about a few different topics around this whole launching a strategic podcast. So 1, how to strategically launch a podcast. 2, mistakes that podcasters make that are costing them leads. And then 3, monetization strategies for podcasting. So we're going to cover quite a bit here. What I'd recommend you do is focus on 1 or 2 things during this time, and then take those, utilize them, come back. Feel free to review this whenever you need to. So how to strategically launch a podcast. A lot of different podcast teachers, strategists, instructors will tell you that you have to get your podcast out into the world, that the best time to launch a podcast was yesterday. You know, the whole build it and they will come thing. I don't believe that that works. I think it's a load of trash and that it actually is not a good strategy, especially when you're coming from a marketing standpoint. Like, this just does not work. I also want to note, before we move on to nailing your niche, that 9 out of 10 podcasts don't make it past 7 episodes. And so if your goal is to have more than 7 episodes, you have to be strategic. You can't just throw it out into the world and be like, all right, who's going to show up? I don't know. You have to be strategic with it. So the first thing you're going to want to do is nail your niche before you start your podcast. What topics do you find interesting? Is there a community of other people that actually enjoy that topic, that are interested in that topic? Can you talk about that topic without losing interest? And this is something that I think is important just from like a mindset standpoint. A lot of times we might feel imposter syndrome when it comes to podcasting. We might say, oh, I am a marketing strategist, or I'm a coach, and there are tons of other coaches and tons of other marketing strategists out in the world who have really fantastic podcasts. And I'm not as, I'm not as much of an expert as they are. I don't have that expertise. They know more than I do. That's not what I'm asking you here. I did not ask if you're an expert in the topic. If you have a working knowledge of it, then that means that you can talk about it, that you can do what you need to do to get your message out into the world, and that people who know less about the topic are going to come to you. So it's not about showing up your peers or your colleagues or being at the same level as them. Like, that's not what podcasting is about. It's about being able to share what you know with your audience in a very strategic way. So think about that when I said, can you talk about this topic without losing interest? And then, will you have enough content to talk about this? I recently did a podcast episode with Sam and Karen of the Making Website Magic podcast. I will make sure that that is somewhere in these notes so you guys can go listen to it. It is so, so, so important that you niche down and that you get clear on who it is that you want to talk to, because so often we think, oh, I'm a marketing coach, so I have to talk about marketing for all businesses. But when you talk about marketing to all businesses and for all businesses, you end up losing people. You're not going to be able to talk to their specific problems because the problems are all over the board. And so you might have people pick and choose what they want to listen to from your podcast, but that's not really what we want. We want them to be able to binge listen. We want them to be able to consume your content, and then take it to that next level and say, I want to work with you. And in order to do that, you have to speak exactly to them, which means that niching down is so important. So go ahead and go listen to that episode after you've watched this through. I think that will be really helpful if you are struggling with niching down. All right. So here are some ways to never run out of content. This is something that people struggle with. They have issues with this. So let's go ahead and get into this. Number one, do extensive competitor and market research. I have a podcast episode about doing market research, how to do it, where to look, how to be strategic with it. So I'll make sure to link that in the notes here as well. Ask your audience. So talk to your audience, ask them what they're struggling with, ask them how you can support them and maybe what their issues are. What are they dealing with? What are their insecurities about? What are they struggling with right now? 3, plan out your content. So I like to call these my content buckets. People call them a bunch of different things, right? Content pillars, content categories. I like content buckets because it makes me think of when I'm at the splash pad with my kids and there's that big bucket that fills up with water and then it dumps down into all the little funnels and all the different little places and the little spin dials and things like that. So the big bucket is your brain. You've got all these ideas and all these things that you could talk about and all these interests that make you you. But you can't talk about all of that on the podcast. So you have to kind of dump it down into these other filters, these other buckets. And what catches in those buckets is going to be what you talk about. So here you can come up with, I like to say, come up with 3 to 5 different topics. So for my podcast, it's about podcasting. And so my 5 topics are podcast marketing, podcast content, podcast marketing content, podcast launching. There's another one. Monetization, podcast monetization. And then I like to throw in that 5th one, which is mindset, because I think that a lot of people who have a podcast or are thinking about having a podcast can struggle with that mindset issue. So those are my 5 content buckets. And I know that if I'm coming to my audience with a topic, it has to be based on those. And if I want to have a different conversation somewhere else, that maybe isn't exactly about podcasting, but is still relevant to my audience, then an Instagram Live or a Facebook Live or a LinkedIn Live might be the best place for that conversation. All right. Number 4, talk about your successes and your failures, but also talk about the successes and failures of your clients. So the people that you're working with, what kind of successes have they seen? How did they get to that point? What are their struggles? Where did you fail in your business? I think it makes you more relatable, makes you more personable when you share those successes and those failures as well. And that's also what's going to set you apart from your competitors, is sharing that behind the scenes, sharing those things that did and didn't work. All right, number 5 is repurposing your content. So if you have past content that you've created, whether it was a live or a blog post or a conversation you had with someone, use that as content for your podcast. All right. So I guess I was supposed to go through these slides. I created this. I just forgot. Okay. Here are some ways that you can do some extensive competitor and market research. Facebook, Pinterest, Twitter, Quora, Google, Instagram, Reddit, and TikTok. Asking your audience, we talked about that. Obviously, you can see my little content buckets here. And then what worked, what didn't with those successes and those failures. And then here are some other ways that you can repurpose your content into a podcast. So blog post, video, infographic, social media posts, content upgrades, or freebies. That's a good one because you can talk through it and then you can direct people back to that podcast episode or from the podcast back to downloading that freebie and getting that upgrade. Discussion questions that you have with your audience, live Q&A that you've had on a platform, or an email that you have created for your audience. All right. So start your marketing early. If you are in the launch pre-launch phase of launching a podcast, you need to start marketing now, like today, tomorrow, please. So when my sister and I started our podcast about being cult survivors, yes, I am a cult survivor. No, I'm not going to get into it here. But if you want to know, send me a DM on Instagram. All right. So we spent 3 full months in the launch phase. And that tends to be unheard of in the solo podcasting space. So we're not with a network. We don't have any backing of like this company backing us or anything like that. Usually those ones are going to be a longer launch phase, but 3 months is a long time for launching a podcast. But we used that time to grow our audience before we launched a single episode. And the reason I did that is because I did not want to launch to no one. I wanted there to be people who were excited and ready to listen to what we were saying. So take a look at our Instagram feed leading up to the launch. Obviously, it's very meme heavy. We had a true crime audience specifically. So I'm going to go ahead and, it's already playing. So you'll go ahead and see that it is not scrolling. That is strange. Okay. That's supposed to scroll up. You can see it's moving, but it's not scrolling. That is so weird. Let's see if we can get this to work. There we go. Okay. I was like, what is happening? So as you can see, we've got the different memes. We've got some questions to our audience, getting them excited, introducing ourselves, getting to know us, and then 30-day countdown. So you'll all see as we keep going, we did 30, we did 15, we did 10, 7, and then from 7, we counted down 5, 6, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And then here you'll see launching your podcast into the world. Today is the day. We're so excited. And we had all our episodes ready to go. Okay. So here are some mistakes that podcasters make that are costing them leads. Now, these are things to consider as you are creating your podcast content and as you are recording those initial episodes. I want you to focus on some of these things. So one of the mistakes is that they talk about everything but their services and products. And this is a question that I get quite often. And that's, Alicia, I want to generate leads with my podcast. How do I do that? And my question back, because I always like to answer questions with a question, is, are you talking about your services? Are you talking about your products on your podcast, within your podcast content? And their answer is usually no. Then I'm like, okay, so there you go. It's so important that you talk about the things that you are selling. Another mistake that people make is that they put ads at the beginning of their podcast within that first 5 minutes. You need to have a dedicated ad space for your podcast. And I think that's really important and something that people are like, oh, but I don't like ads in my podcast, or I don't like that. So put it at the end, put it right before your outro. If it doesn't feel comfortable, putting it in the mid-roll or putting it at that 10-minute mark. And I say the 10-minute mark if you have a podcast that is longer than 30 minutes. So that way, people that are listening to that first half of the episode can still get that ad and listen in for that ad. Only mentioning your products or services in the ad space. So yes, we were saying, talk about your products and services. Yes. Have an ad. Yes, that's great. Make sure you're putting it in a strategic place, but don't just stop there. Talk about your services organically throughout the episode. So people ask, okay, how do I do that though? So one of the ways that I like to explain this to people is, if I am having a conversation with someone on my podcast and they share something that they are working through with their podcast and how they were able to overcome it, awesome. Instead of me just saying, wow, that's really cool, and then moving on to the next topic, I can say, that's really interesting. I love how you were able to approach that. I recently did something very similar with a client where this is how we walked through it. And so it makes it more of a dialogue and a conversation. And I'm talking about, hey, this is an example. It's still relevant to my listeners. They're still getting value. This other person is getting value of like, oh, wow, yeah, that's a cool way to also approach that. I might want to do that next time. And I'm sharing how I work with my clients, the strategic ways in which I work with my clients. So that way it makes it's very organic. It doesn't feel like I'm selling this thing and I have to get this thing out and we're going to talk about this. Like if it feels right in the moment, then I will make sure to talk about it. All right. So having a guest only podcast show is also a mistake that people make that is going to not allow them to generate leads with their podcast. When you have a guest on your show, yes, you can fill in those little anecdotes and those things that are interesting and are relevant to what you're talking about. But it is so important that you also have solo episodes, or maybe it's a hot take because maybe an entire solo episode doesn't feel comfortable to you. And you would feel more comfortable if instead you said, here's how I feel about this topic, and then having it in there. I think that works a lot better for people who are nervous about doing solos. But if you feel comfortable doing solo episodes, then sprinkle those in. Of course, you're going to ask the question, right? How many guests to how many solos? What do I do? I always like to say it's up to you, right? Like, what is your comfort level? What feels good to you? With that said, I would say about every 4 episodes. So make every 5th episode a solo episode at the very least. I like to do kind of like a variety of solos versus guest episodes. It also depends on how many guests that I have booked out. So right now I have guests booked out for every other week for the next 2 to 3 months, like 2.5 months. That means that I have quite a few solo episodes. But if I get sick and my voice is like, yeah, we're not doing this today, then I have the ability to pull some guest episodes up. And that way I can take care of myself and make sure that I feel better before I get back on for my solo episode. I'm not rushing that solo episode. So allowing yourself some space helps. Some people do every other episode. I also have a client where she has guests booked out for 6 months. And so for her to throw in a solo episode feels like a lot more work because she's already booked out so far and she's already having great conversations and able to like create such great value for her audience. So from here, she just says, all right, as I feel like it and as I see the need and as things come up and topics come up, then I will have a solo episode. And it's really, like I said, it's up to you. My recommendation is every 5 episodes at least. Another mistake is never mentioning the show notes. So you want to make sure that you're driving traffic to those show notes for the links to connect with their audience. So if you mention a previous podcast episode, have the link for that. If you are talking about a book or talking about a freebie or something that is going to help your audience, say, check the show notes for the link, we'll have that in there. It makes it super easy for people. Winging your content plan. Now, this is not to say that if you are someone who likes to fly by the seat of your pants, that you have to have a content plan. This is where I think knowing yourself and knowing what works best for you is going to be really important. I'm someone where I like to have a few months planned out, at least like 2 or 3 months, and kind of an idea of where I want to take the conversation while still allowing myself space that if I have an inspiration of like aha moment or my clients are struggling with something specifically, it's very, very easy for me to say, we're going to switch this around a bit and we're going to talk about this for a couple weeks. So having a strategic podcast plan still allows you to ensure that you are making the most of your show, that you're creating quality content for your audience, but also that you're not showing up 2 days before an episode needs to go live with a sore throat or sick and then having to record something. We don't want that. Like, plan, be strategic, and consider your audience as you are creating that content plan. All right. So work on 1 to 2 of these things. If you are someone who has already started in the podcast launch process, just focus on 1 or 2 at a time so you don't overwhelm yourself. I don't want you to be like, I have to do all these things. No, oh my goodness. No, take a breath, breathe, work on 1 or 2 moving forward. All right. Now we're going to talk about monetization strategies for podcasting. Most podcasters do not make money from their podcasts. That is like point blank. Most people are not making any money at all, like $0. It is mostly a hobby or is an interest, and this is their way that they're able to express that interest. So there's no right or wrong way to make money from your show. Here we're going to talk through some tools, some tricks, some strategies that I've seen people use, but know that you can decide which path works best for you. So, ways to monetize your podcast: we've got affiliate marketing, sponsorships and advertising, premium podcast content, products or merch, public speaking, and your own services, courses, or consulting. So let's talk affiliate marketing first. What is affiliate marketing? Affiliate marketing is when you promote a product or service of someone else, and then you get a small kickback from that product or service. So I like to promote Buzzsprout as my podcast host of choice. I have their links all over my website, and I get a $25 Amazon gift card. No, I get $20 to my PayPal, and the person who signs up gets a $25 Amazon gift card after a few months of being with Buzzsprout. I like it because, one, I'm a diehard fan of Buzzsprout. I love their customer service. I love the ease of using their website and the back end of trying to like make sure my podcast is doing what it needs to do and looking at those stats. They also have like such great resources that I think every podcaster should use them, right? So they're just so fantastic. And so I like to use that affiliate marketing because I talk about them anyway. I get excited about them and their product, their services and their product. So why not get a small kickback for it? Now, they're not sponsoring my show. So this is where it's different. They didn't say, hey, Alicia, we want dedicated ad space, and here's how much we're going to pay you based on your stats. Here you go. That's not really how it's going to be with the affiliate marketing. Affiliate marketing is more, I talk about this service I love. They send me money. They send you money, or you get this product or service at no extra cost, and then I get a small kickback. So what are some products that you can promote? Consider that. What are some things that your audience, that you're already recommending to your audience, that you're already talking about on a regular basis and would be a good thing to promote? Sponsors and advertising. So the CPM, or the quick click per mil model, is about $25 for every 1,000 downloads for a mid-roll. Just to be considered to allow to have like use of the CPM model, you tend to have 10,000 or more downloads every month. And most people aren't going to get that. Like, honestly and truly, most people do not get 10,000 downloads per month. One example that I saw, the show gets over 30,000 downloads every week and makes about $1,500 per episode. So in that case, it makes sense to use the CPM model because you already have that huge influx of downloads, and it makes sense. But for someone who's just starting out, this is not the model that you're going to want to consider, because you're not going to go from 0 to 10,000 to 30,000 downloads every month like that, unless you already have a massive established audience. So let's talk about a different model that I think works really well for sponsors. That is the value-based model. So in this ad model, advertisers pay a flat rate to promote their products or services on your podcast. So if 200 people listen to your podcast, you can get about $500 by talking about the product. But if you use the CPM model, you're only going to get $400. So this person says, look, you are talking to our ideal audience. You have you have their ears. We want to talk to them. We want to be in their ears. So here is $500 for an episode. I want you to talk about our service, talk about our product, talk about our services. And then from there, we will pay you $500 just for that mention. Now, this is where it's different than affiliate. Affiliate, it would be that you would get a kickback for every person that buys it. This one, you are simply saying, I have their ear. This is where it's going to be really important to know your audience, know who you're talking to, get some polls from them, and be able to say, these are the demographics of our audience. All right, moving on to premium podcast content. Oh, sorry. Patreon is a great way to have a Patreon is a great way to be able to share your additional information or additional quality premium content with your audience. This works really well for people who don't have a business. So we're talking about different monetization strategies that don't have to do with selling your own services. We're going to get to those. Those ones are my favorite. And so check these out as just like, hey, these are some ideas that I can use. Another thing that I've seen is where people will pay a premium for past episodes. So here, let's go back. Here I saw someone where they were selling past episodes of their podcast for about $1 each. And then people were able to get that additional episodes that weren't available to everyone that way. And I think that this strategy works okay. There are so many podcasts out there that I don't think that people tend to pay for premium content, especially if it's past episodes. But if you have things that are maybe like additional and not just past episodes where they could have already listened to them, I think that this can work really well. All right, products or merch. So here are some merch shops that do drop shipping, which I think is really important for podcasters because you don't want to have to fork over a ton of money just to have a bunch of t-shirts sitting in your garage. We don't need that. So podcastmerch.com, Printful, Podswag, and Teespring are all great places where you get a percentage of what you're able to sell, and they do the printing and the shipping. Public speaking. By using your podcast as a place where you're able to share your thought leadership and share your expertise, it allows you to showcase, hey, look, I know what I'm talking about. I know how to talk about this stuff. Your podcast is a great way to do that. And then it can allow you to land speaking gigs or speaking opportunities. So if you have someone that you're maybe pitching to be on their summit, or you're pitching to be a speaker at a conference, you can direct people back to your podcast as like, hey, look, this is the topic that I think would be really interesting for your audience. Here are my thoughts and how I've already talked about it, and here's my expertise on it. So it allows you to, in a very easy way, show that you're an expert. Now for my favorite way to monetize a podcast, and that is your own services, courses, or consulting. So here are some things that you can sell on your podcast: coaching programs, services, strategy sessions, one-on-one time with you, courses or memberships, content upgrades, masterminds, an app. So we have a client who is creating an app that is for like astrology based things. It's going to have a community to it. It's going to have like kind of a membership style to it as well, but it's specific for this app. And so they're going to use their podcast to sell the app to their audience. You can also sell an event or your books. So these are all different ways that you can sell your stuff on your podcast. And I think that this is so underutilized. I personally would rather sell my own things than to sell or promote someone else's for a small kickback. I know that my services are higher ticket and that each person that converts is going to be worth a lot more than having a bunch of people convert for a small chunk of change. Now that we've talked through the different ways to monetize your podcast, which way feels the most aligned to you? This is really important. You don't have to do something just because I say this is my favorite thing. Yes, it is my favorite thing. And I have strategies around it. And this is what we work with our clients on. But if a sponsorship model works for you, then awesome. That is so exciting and so incredible. And I hope that it works fantastically for you. If an affiliate strategy works best for you, then yes, awesome. Hooray. That is great. That is up to you. You get to decide which one is going to be the most aligned with the way that you like to show up for your audience and the way that your audience expects you to show up. All right. Any questions? So here's my little Star Wars reference here. If you feel like, what are you talking about, Alicia? I have no idea what you're saying. This makes no sense. Let's talk. Send me a DM. You can also book a strategy session where we can help you kind of plan out your podcast launch over the course of an hour. Obviously, it's going to be a little bit of time to focus on that, but we are able to still help you answer any questions you have, get those results of like, okay, we've planned out your marketing for your launch. Awesome. And then you're good to go. We also have VIP days for people who are looking to launch podcasts. So that is available as well. Or if you would like us to do a full service launch with you, we have that available. And that is over the course of 2 months. So you can start now, plan to launch in about 2 months from now. All right. Here's where you can find me. You can send me an email at aliciag@aliciagalati.com, or you can find me on social media at alicia.galati or Galati Media. All right. Thank you so much for listening. I know this is going to be helpful for you. Make sure that you're taking 1 or 2 things from this. Don't overdo it. Don't stress yourself out. Breathe. You've got this. And I'll talk to you soon.